How did you get on records? That's a big one, too. Everybody goes about it a different way. I happen to be lucky enough.
You had to laugh at me, but I'm such a...
Imagine a smoky roadside roadhouse in 1955, neon crackling overhead, when a timid farm boy named Lester Flatt stepped on stage with nothing but a flat-top Martin and a voice critics said sounded like a kazoo stuffed with hay. The drunks near the pool table jeered, yet 15 minutes later those same mouths were whistling "Roll in My Sweet Baby's Arms." And Nashville would soon discover that plain and nasal could move more vinyl than perfect crooning ever did. Every legend in today's story began beneath a similar cloud of doubt, wearing ridicule like a name tag, trudging through beer-sticky floors toward futures even their mothers weren't sure they deserved. Yet somewhere between the jeers and the jukebox, they turned insults into anthems and rewrote the sound of victory. Back then, the Grand Ole Opry crowd treated off-key notes like felonies. Ernest Tubb piled them up like boot prints in wet clay, unapologetic, declaring, "If you hit the wrong pitch, hit it hard and people'll think you meant it." Rumor whispers that one jealous bandleader once yanked his monitor levels so low Ernest couldn't hear himself, hoping he'd crumble. Instead, he leaned closer to the mic, grinned wider, and invented honky-tonk grit with every cracked syllable. Hank Snow followed, stiff as a church pew, but his runaway train rhythms pushed pure finesse off the tracks. One Nashville columnist dismissed Snow as the tin whistle of country. The very week his record shipped 1 million copies, proving even critics can't outshout a jukebox when the dollar dances. Johnny Paycheck kicked saloon doors 2 decades later and sang like sandpaper dragged across rust. Tabloids claimed the growl was marinated nightly in cheap whiskey and something stronger, and one columnist swore Paycheck once pawned his own Grammy to clear a bar tab. Outside the lights, David Allan Coe sharpened an even nastier snarl behind prison walls, penning outlaw anthems so raw that label execs locked the masters in a safe, terrified radio would faint. He bragged that his vocal cords were barbed wire dipped in bourbon, and no publicist dared translate that metaphor into family-friendly copy. Willie Nelson drifted in next, behind the beat and high on renegade timing. An A-list producer supposedly stamped his early demo stoned porch mumbling before trashing it. Willie fished it from the bin, pressed 1,000 copies himself, and let the Texas dance halls decide. They voted with boot heels, not vowels, and the porch mumble became rebel poetry. Down the highway, Johnny Cash thundered low and flat, like a train reciting scripture. Executives fretted his obsession with prison crowds would sink ticket sales. Instead, the fulsome cheer proved that steel bars intensify applause far better than velvet curtains. Critics thought the ladies would be softer targets. Wrong. Loretta Lynn hauled Appalachian rawness into polite parlors, her vowels so sharp they could carve rock candy. One radio boss threatened a boycott unless she toned it down. She cranked it up, wrote Fist City, and knocked Pretenders off the charts. Tammy Wynette's trembling vibrato wobbled like a bent saw, prompting gossip writers to insist she gargled throat syrup between verses. Instead, she gargled heartbreak and watched Stand By Your Man scorch country history. Dolly Parton arrived with an octave so bright a producer scrawled Minnie Mouse on her demo box, then wiped egg off his face after Jolene went gold in a month and became the cautionary tale every new gatekeeper learns on day one. Porter Wagoner strutted out in suits brighter than casino chandeliers, his dramatic vibrato ricocheting through rhinestone corridors. Purists choked, fans cheered, and Porter's TV show became appointment viewing. Buck Owens plugged a Telecaster into Bakersfield twang, brash enough to make Nashville clutch its pearls. Reviewers labeled him an electric hayseed, yet every unplugged critic secretly hummed Tiger by the Tail in the shower. Tom T. Hall simply talked through melodies, voice like notebook paper rasping across gravel, and proved that a good story never needed a high C to land like a gut punch. Grandpa Jones yodeled comedy so nasal that reviewers called him a novelty clown. Then Hee Haw turned him into American comfort food. Boxcar Willie sang hobo lullabies from rail cars where passengers once tossed coins just to make him stop. Vegas later minted him a millionaire. Jimmy Dean got mocked for talk singing Big Bad John. He laughed, packaged sausage under the same name, and became richer than half of Music Row. Lefty Frizzell slurred syllables like they were slipping off bar stools, with rumor hinting his backstage coffee was laced with midnight spirits. Yet guitarists still chase his elastic phrasing the way surfers chase the perfect wave. Charlie Pride faced a bigger hurdle, not just tone, but skin. Program directors claimed country radio wouldn't spin a black singer. Pride's label mailed stations unlabeled test pressings. The songs rocketed up the request lines before any DJ knew the face behind the baritone, proving bias can't survive a stubborn hook. June Carter Cash brought comedic hiccups and quirky phrasing, and early Opry producers allegedly dialed her mic down until fans shouted for more volume. Family drama flared when her punchline timing upstaged bigger stars, but June just grinned and strummed louder, living proof that charm isn't measured in decibels. Behind every roar of applause sat a critic polishing daggers. They logged insults like accountants tallying sins: nasal, flat, sleepy, stiff, clownish, shrill, monotone, out of tune. They missed the point. The audience wasn't grading technical purity, they were buying emotion in 3-minute hits. When fancy crooners crooned perfection, bar stools stayed warm. When raw voices cracked truth, cash registers sang harmony. Industry insiders tried sabotage, too. One tale claims a studio runner swapped Willie's master tapes with blank reels hours before an important playback. Willie just laughed, booked a cheap motel room, and re-recorded the entire session overnight, cigarettes smoldering in ashtrays and a lone bottle of rye keeping time. The motel version outsold anything that came from the plush studio across town. Another legend says George Jones once arrived so late and so foggy that the engineer stitched together half-coherent lines into a patchwork vocal. Radio called it haunting, unaware the ghost they heard was deadline desperation. While gossips whispered about hard stuff, illicit smokes, and steamy backstage rendezvous, fans only heard their own lives echoed back. Critics printed big words like authenticity, but these singers lived it raw. Night buses, diner coffee, guitar cases doubling as pillows. Every rasp and wobble carried the weight of diesel fumes and broken promises. That weight cannot be faked, auto-tuned, or politely schooled away. The market eventually learned a brutal math. Polish sells once, but scars sell forever. Record labels that first mocked these voices later reissued deluxe box sets, touting original rough mixes as priceless relics. Festivals built entire weekends around twang once deemed trashy. Hollywood optioned biopics, softening edges the real singers had spent decades sharpening. Yet somewhere in those scripts, a studio executive always added a line where the hero nervously asks a mentor, "Do I really sound that bad?" And the mentor always replies, "Kid, that's why they'll never forget you." Today, algorithm-curated playlists still rank tune-perfect robots above human gravel, but scroll deeper and you'll find teenagers rediscovering Grandpa Jones memes, Wanda Jackson TikToks, and Outlaw vinyl spinning on USB turntables. The same nasal bite and behind-the-beat laziness that once drew ridicule now feels revolutionary beside glossy sameness. Each streaming spike is another cosmic pie in the face of the critic who wrote, "This hillbilly racket will die by Christmas." Perhaps the sharpest twist came during a televised tribute when Charlie Pride, long past chart prime, walked on stage with trembling hands and missed his opening note by a country mile. The auditorium froze. Pride steadied himself, smiled, and repeated the line perfectly. Then the crowd erupted, not because the note was right the second time, but because imperfection proved the moment was alive. No algorithm could script that hush or that roar. So why did mockery become jet fuel? Because ridicule forces a choice: quit or double down. Lester Flatt doubled down by writing hooks the mockers couldn't ignore. Loretta doubled down by writing truths husbands couldn't silence. Johnny Cash doubled down by singing to men society locked away. Every sneer became a rung on a ladder these artists climbed, while their critics stayed on the ground, polishing safer voices that history promptly forgot. If you distill country music to one dusty truth, it is this: perfection bores, but honesty sells. Bent notes, bend hearts. A slurred apology sounds more genuine than a pristine aria when you're sipping midnight coffee in a fluorescent diner. That's why the voices once labeled ugly now headline playlists called Real Country, while sanitized clones gather digital dust. The circle keeps spinning, just like that neon outside the roadhouse. Picture the final scene. An empty stage after closing time, bar stools upended, peanut shells swept into lonely piles, and a faint hum from an amplifier still cooling. You swear you hear Hank Snow's stiff yodel echoing or Tammy Wynette's wobble lingering like perfume. The jeers have faded, but the songs remain, stubborn as kazoo. Somewhere a critic drafts tomorrow's snark about a new kid with a quaver, unaware they are crowning the next legend by mistake. And somewhere else a teenager presses play, hearing June's comedic hiccup through cracked phone speakers and deciding imperfection sounds exactly like freedom. Don Williams floated through the 70s like a porch swing at dusk, voice so soft a reviewer joked you needed a stethoscope to detect it. Detractors called him the human lullaby, yet his mellow whispers toppled rock bands on the Billboard 100. Critics missed the secret: exhaustion. After nights of diesel travel, audiences didn't want to be screamed awake. They wanted reassurance that heartbreak could be survived peacefully. Don supplied that medicine in 3-minute doses, each chorus a sigh of relief they could sing to themselves while washing dishes or chasing toddlers through single-wide kitchens. Roy Acuff faced the opposite jab: too sentimental, too theatrical, too churchy. Reviewers said his nasal hymns belonged in a revival tent, not the Opry stage. Undeterred, Acuff rolled a fiddle across America, turning sentimental into sacred. When soldiers shipped to Europe packed his 78s alongside ration tins, the industry finally acknowledged that comfort travels farther than critique. Decades later, a journalist interviewed a veteran who admitted that Acuff's quaver got him through nights when artillery hid the stars. The critic who once mocked those hymns never received a letter that heavy. Jimmy Rogers, the original yodeling brakeman, entered recording studios plagued by tuberculosis and still howled blues licks that confused genre gatekeepers. Purists scoffed. Blues was for Memphis, yodels for Swiss Alps, yet Rogers welded them into a train whistle that launched the entire country industry. Even dying, he cut sessions propped against pillows. A newspaper critic questioned whether releasing those frail takes was exploitative. Fans answered by buying every last copy, needing to believe that courage really could live in shellac. Buck Owens once dared bring crisp pickguard snap and electric drums into stuffy halls where pedal steel reigned, and insiders called the sound a carnival racket. He grinned, twanged louder, and televised the whole show nationwide. A stepping-on-rake moment arrived when the CMA board withheld nominations, reasoning rock contamination. That same year, Bakersfield Records outsold Nashville by a country mile, and the board quietly adjusted its purity standards. Owen strolled back in later, trophy in hand, the grin unchanged. Tom T. Hall rarely hit high notes, preferring to narrate like a campfire philosopher. Some critics sneered, "He's talking, not singing," as if melody were a prerequisite for truth. Hall responded by writing Harper Valley PTA, a knife disguised as gossip, which cut deeper than any dove-toned ballad. Every verse named names and poured sweet tea on hypocrisy, turning small-town whispers into worldwide catharsis. The single sold millions, and suddenly spoken-word honesty felt revolutionary again. Hall kept writing, each song a new newspaper folded into melody, each critic forced to concede that storytelling pays in both cash and conscience. Kitty Wells slipped through a crack in the patriarchal wall by daring to question why women couldn't sing whiskey laments too. DJs initially banned her, claiming female virtue might shatter if exposed to barroom themes. Kitty recorded, "It wasn't God who made honky-tonk angels," voice almost shy, yet unwavering, and the record flew off shelves faster than censors could object. In one swoop, she paved runway for Dolly, Tammy, and every TikTok firebrand who now belts unapologetic truths. Wells never shouted. She simply stated facts in a tone soft enough to bypass gates, yet sharp enough to slice them open once inside. Wanda Jackson stormed in wearing fringe and growling rockabilly riffs that made Sunday drivers swerve. Press nicknamed her the female Elvis, but backhandedly claimed she lacked ladylike restraint. Wanda took that insult, stitched it on a leather jacket, and turned up the grit. Offstage tales whispered of midnight races down Route 66 and steamy backstage rendezvous with guitar cases for pillows. Every rebel girl wielding a Strat today channels Wanda whether they recognize the echo or not, because her shout taught the next generation to trade glass slippers for amplifiers. Porter Wagoner eventually met his match in Dolly Parton, the so-called Minnie Mouse vocalist he first hired and later tried to sideline. Dolly's high trill defied decibel physics, and early letters to music magazines accused her of squeaking. She smiled, wrote Jolene in minutes, and squeaked all the way to platinum. When Porter attempted contract shackles, Dolly penned, "I Will Always Love You," turned farewell into global royalty checks, and demonstrated that the sweetest vengeance is broadcast in crystal-clear harmony. Finally, there's the curious case of Don Williams's opposite, Johnny Cash's mirror, and Dolly's unlikely friend, a benefit tour where their threads of smooth, rumble, and trill knit one impossibly warm blanket over a freezing arena. Legend says the monitor feed fried mid-set, forcing the trio to trust gut instincts alone. Reviewers braced for disaster. Instead, the absence of technology revealed chemistry. Notes floated slightly south or north of target, yet fans swore it was the greatest harmony they'd ever heard because the wobble made it human. Perspective sharpens with time. Those leather-bound critics who once dismissed these singers retired to quiet suburbs where their yellowed newspaper columns now line attic trunks. Meanwhile, streaming services beam lefties' slurred heartache into earbuds of students who weren't alive when analog tapes snapped. What endures isn't pitch, but pulse. The irregular heartbeat you hear when a singer bargains with regret under neon. That's why modern producers chase lo-fi authenticity with million-dollar plugins, while a scratchy cut from 1958 still hijacks playlists at 3 a.m., reminding night owls that crackle can feel like comfort. The cycle keeps spinning. A new hopeful uploads a demo, trolls mock the quaver, playlists ignore it, then a viral clip of Grandma two-stepping to that same track flips the algorithm. Overnight, the outsider becomes headline. Somewhere, an old critic squints at the notification, hearing his own forgotten sneer echo back like karma in reverb. Maybe he pours bourbon, maybe he chuckles, but deep down he knows the truth has never changed. Imperfection plus persistence equals immortality. So the next time you stumble onto a backroad bar where the PA crackles and the singer's pitch drifts like tumbleweed, lean in. You might be witnessing the birth of the next voice critics will hate and history will embrace. Buy the ragged merch, tip the jar heavy, and forget the pundits. Because long after pristine notes fade, the crooked ones keep humming through open windows on summer nights, reminding us that swagger and scars outlive polish every single time. Take Roy Acuff's battered fiddle, for instance. Visitors tap the glass case, expecting to hear the ghost of Wabash Cannonball vibrate back. That's what imperfection leaves behind. Stains no polisher can erase. Perfect tones evaporate, flawed ones remain. Years from now, somebody will sample Lefty's slur for a hologram duet in a genre we haven't named yet. And newly minted experts will argue online about whether the wobble is authentic or engineered. They'll miss the irony that the very blemish they debate is the certificate of authenticity. Meanwhile, an aging Wanda Jackson will laugh at the fuss, pour black coffee over yesterday's headlines, and crank the volume on her own growl because nothing drowns out regret like a chorus that once rattled stained glass faith into dust. History keeps every off note like a fingerprint, proof that a real throat, not a silicon chip, once trembled in the dark and dared millions to listen closely forever. So tonight, when the last neon flickers out and the broom sweeps peanut shells toward the door, remember every mockery recorded here. It was all just applause wearing a cheap disguise, and every sneered-at syllable is still echoing somewhere, begging you to sing off-key and loud enough to outlive the critics.